Right, so it's, I would say, we can make a start. Right, so today we are here to, first of all, try to get this fundraiser going for Glitter Cymru. I think I've been doing some proper social media engagement or sharing of what Glitter Cymru is, but we will have a look at where you can find more information about Glitter Cymru. I'm not gonna introduce them myself too much, because it's better if you go directly to the source and have a look at what's available, and there's plenty of available. We will look at material from the National Museum Wales. We will look at art, archaeology, and history, in particular LGBTQ plus histories, with trying to capture different angles, trying to understand a bit of what was sexuality, but also love and identities in the past. We're gonna go quite back in time. I think the most ancient landscape that we will kind of explore is from Bronze Age Mesopotamia up to modern days Wales. So it's going to be quite a journey, but not particularly detailed. So I'm not going to go into the nitty-gritty or to the data and evidence of archaeologists and academics. So I'll try to make it as accessible, but also as fun or interesting as possible, perhaps. Having said that, I would like to keep it as informal as possible, in the sense that please feel free to ask questions via social media as we go, but also on the Twitch chat. You should be able to access it by clicking on the Twitch link. Otherwise, I have Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook open here, so you can also ask questions through those channels. Very well. So I mentioned Glitter Cymru, and this is basically the group that we are trying to support with this very short and flash fundraiser to try to hit our target of £500. You can see the target bar above. Feel free to donate anytime you want during this talk. It would be very much appreciated if you could hit the target soon. Glitter Cymru works mostly in Wales. As I said, I'm not gonna talk too much about the group, because there's plenty out there available for you to read, and you can read directly from the original source. They have platforms on, they work on different social media platforms: Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and they also have a website. So please feel free to have a look, and I post the link here. So whenever you want, please just go for it, and during this talk as well, if you need to have a look. The main point is that they support BAME LGBT Q+ people in Wales, and by LGBT we mean people that belong to the communities. That can be lesbians, gay, bisexual, transgender, queer people, but also beyond that. They're not necessarily described by the acronym, but they are still part of the LGBTQ+ umbrella. BAME refers to Black, Asian, minority ethnic groups, people of color in Wales. So this is for you, Glitter Cymru, and hopefully we will manage to hit. I can see the donations going up, and this is fantastic. Thank you so much for that. So the aim of this talk really is very simple. We have always been part of this world. We always were part of societies, and we will always be. We are not a new thing. For us, it's time to rediscover our stories and histories that were taken from us. We are going to look at some evidence that are available, and we will also talk a bit about the challenges of reconstructive or rediscovering LGBTQ+ histories. Right, so this is the disclaimer that I have to do before we dive into the archaeology, art, and history, which is it is difficult to reconstruct LGBTQ+ histories to talk about love, sex, desire, gender, and identities in the ancient world and of people who lived hundreds of thousands of years ago. Not because it's a difficult task by itself, but because of the evidence that currently we have available to undertake this task. Meaning our understanding of what is LGBT plus is different from what people may have experienced or may have conceived or just thought about 2,000, 3,000 or 4,000 years ago. That doesn't mean that they were not there. Perhaps different names, different perceptions, or different experiences were there. They were just named or codified or lived in different ways. So our first level is lack of evidence. Sometimes most of the evidence that we have nowadays are about leaders, warriors, artists and scientists, the famous people. But we don't know much about the common people like us, not necessarily being represented in history or in the archaeological records sometimes. But that doesn't mean that it's not there. It's just a matter of finding it, and it's a matter of giving new interpretation of what we have, revisiting somehow even our collections and archives. Also, as I mentioned before, our understanding of love, passion, and sexuality and identities cannot always be directly translated to people living 2,000, 3,000, 4,000 years ago because of culture, because of society. They may have a completely different perception of the landscapes and worlds around them, and therefore it would be over simplistic just to transfer our experiences and concepts into people that live in different times in different societies. So we need to go and kind of look through their eyes and see how they were seeing and experiencing the world through their eyes, basically. Also, a disclaimer that I won't be able to cover all the experiences and expressions of the LGBTQ plus communities. It's not the purpose of this talk. We're just going to look at some objects, and while we do a bit of fundraising, and therefore I want to apologize because I won't be able to capture all the diversity within the LGBTQ plus under the umbrella, and hopefully in the future we'll be able to explore different angles, different experiences, different objects. So this is just a very preliminary presentation. It's just want to be hopefully fun and interesting, and just try to open some topics using the collection from the museums of National Museum in Wales. So I mentioned that we will be using the collection from the National Museum Wales, but I just want to say that I'm very grateful to Mark, who is curator at the St Fagans Museums in Wales, because not just because he helped me to access the online collection, but also share some ideas with Mark, but also because of his extraordinary work around collecting LGBTQ plus objects and building an archive of LGBTQ plus histories and experiences. And in fact, I recommend you to get in touch with Mark should you want to know more about this. Okay, let's start with the first object. Right, so you have in front of you one of the objects from the National Museum Wales. It's a metal object. It's a cover of a sword, a sword sheath, and it's made of a material similar to copper or bronze, and represents some figures. It represents some Roman gods. We are going back to a theatre or an amphitheatre in Wales. Here at this site, besides identifying the Romano-British amphitheatre, we also identified a large number of objects. These objects were used by several peoples. A lot of people frequenting these spaces were likely military of Romano-British communities, part of legions, but they were also commoners. And among them, we identified this particular object that I've chosen today for its relevance, but also because it's going to be we will use this as a trampoline, as a window to go even more in the past, backwards in time. Here on this plate, we can see two figures, one clearer than the other, I guess. There is a feminine goddess, likely a Venus, and a Mercury that is on her side. Now, I think we are pretty much, many people are familiar with the classic names of Venus and Mercury, the Roman gods. And some people are also familiar that very often we tend to equate or compare gods across cultures. Now, for instance, we tend to compare the Roman Venus with the Greek Aphrodites, or we can tend to compare the Roman Mercury with the Greek Hermes. However, it would be a bit oversimplistic just to directly equate or compare the two. It is true that they can share some similarities, or they can influence each other throughout histories. Different cults or similar cults can also influence each other through histories. So here we have an example of a Venus and a Mercury that perhaps were inspired in the Roman times by the Greek equivalents, the Aphrodite and Hermes. So for us, it will be useful to this object will be useful to explore the influences behind the goddess Venus or Aphrodite, the victorious Aphrodite, the goddess of love and war, in the Near East, where the influences, where this goddess was, how was this goddess inspired or influenced by other gods or goddesses in the Mediterranean area, mostly the Eastern Mediterranean. But it's also relevant for us to use this object to clarify the term of hermaphrodites. We know that one of the myths and legends around Hermes and Aphrodite was a child of them, Hermaphroditus, which was a god resembling sometimes depicted or represented more with masculine traits or masculine features, sometimes with more feminine features, sometimes with a combination of both. And there's different representations throughout history, but what is relevant here is the origins of this name and the component of these two gods and the let's say the shared features of both gods. We say that we are going to use this plate to jump back in time. We are going to go to the Near East, where perhaps an influence, a god or a goddess that influenced a victorious Aphrodite can be found. So we are traveling back to 4,000 years ago, roughly, or perhaps a bit more than that, when we can kind of trace or explore a bit of the earlier or older gods that may have inspired Mediterranean goddesses such as Aphrodite and Venus, in particular the victorious Aphrodite, this goddess that were not just goddess of love, but also goddess of war and victory. And very often these goddesses are compared with Ashtart from the Phoenician communities, or from goddesses such as Inanna or Ishtar in Bronze Age Mesopotamia. As I say, it would be a mistake to directly compare this goddess, but we can see or trace some similarities, in particular in terms of influences on areas such as love or war. This particular case that I want to describe now is the case of the goddess Ishtar or Inanna. It's relevant because in the archaeological record, and also literary record, it's often referred to as a gender-changing goddess. Sometimes Inanna identifies herself as with feminine traits, as a woman. Sometimes identify herself as a man. Sometimes some texts clearly refer to the masculine traits, and sometimes to the will of Inanna or Ishtar to present herself as a man. This is interesting, and it's particularly interesting for us in our kind of journey to rediscover LGBTQ plus histories. But it's also useful for us to reconstruct societies around these gods. What I mean by that is that there were also followers of the goddess Ishtar and Inanna. And very often archaeologists refer to these followers as people that resemble hermaphrodites. And modern scholars describe them as men considered woman-like, or perhaps as gender non-conforming people. So what these texts, what this literature, what what archaeologists can tell us is not just about the gods or goddess, but about the people that were worshipping them, people that were identifying with with the goddess, people that were looking up or looking for protection or inspiration or help. Or some sort of devotion towards this type of goddess, and therefore there could be a sense of shared identities among these people. Ishtar is going to be useful for us not only to understand societies in Bronze Age Mesopotamia, but also to understand and explore one of the earliest evidence for a homoromantic or homoerotic love in literature. We're gonna travel a bit forward in time now. We are around 2000 BC, which is 4,000 years ago, where some scholars believe that the epic poems or the poems of Gilgamesh or Bilgamesh were composed. Now, the most complete evidence of this poem are more recent, around maybe 3,200, 3,300 years old, from the archive of Ashurbanipal, and they are tablets with these inscribed poems. But the poems itself is believed to be much older than that, 4,000 years old, perhaps more or less. The figures that I'm presenting here are representations of the heroes described in this epic poem. Now, these are images that do not necessarily represent Gilgamesh or Enkidu, which are the two main heroes of these poems, but these are what the collective imaginary often visualize or think of when we mention Gilgamesh and Enkidu. Perhaps this figure that is often referred to as a Gilgamesh was not, in fact, the legendary Gilgamesh. It was another hero that was sharing similar characteristics. Here you can see this person with this long beard with typical stylistic features of the time, holding a sort of feline. It looks like he's holding a sort of cat. Well, in a way it's correct, but it should be seen as a sign of kind of power and domination over, for instance, a big cat or a lion-like creature more than a cat. But anyway, here they are, Enkidu and Gilgamesh. So just to introduce you a bit more about, introduce you into this narrative and the poem. What I can tell you is that more than a single book, as we often think of epic poems or poetry or literature in general, it's a composition. It's a group of different stories and poems, and they all represent or talk about the adventure or the travels of Gilgamesh and Enkidu. First of all, Gilgamesh is sometimes also mentioned as in the lists of kings of Uruk. And sometimes it's just mentioned as a legendary mythical hero. So for today, we're just going to concentrate on Gilgamesh, the hero of the legends, although there is sometimes an overlap, or perhaps there is some sort of historical influences. But it would be a quite controversial topic, and certainly the evidence would be minimal at the moment. But nonetheless, Gilgamesh was incredibly strong, you can see from the way it's represented here. And he was he had to go through several challenges. I think we are used to this idea of the hero having to go through the journey of many, many challenges. And at some point, he was presented with a person that was meant to be as strong and challenging as himself. And that would be Enkidu. Enkidu, that in the poems is often referred to as a challenger, an enemy, and then the two overcome their first initial step, and they became incredibly strong friends, or perhaps even more. They had to go through so many different adventures, and the goddess Ishtar, the victorious goddess of love and war, tried to seduce Gilgamesh. But he rejected her. Now, as all people, when they are rejected, she only had her only desire was to destroy Gilgamesh and Enkidu, of course. So she sent them more challenges. I think at some point she sent this kind of celestial bull that was incredibly powerful. But Gilgamesh and Enkidu again joined forces, and without the help of the gods, destroyed this, overcame this challenge as well. They became perhaps a bit too cocky, or perhaps a bit too perhaps aggressive even. But what happened is that the gods were not particularly impressed with their behavior. End of the story is basically that Enkidu ended up being cursed by the gods and eventually died because of the curse. And this is where we have really the most insightful understanding of Gilgamesh experiences, or the story of Gilgamesh in a homoerotic or homoromantic key. It says that Gilgamesh was destroyed, was devastated by the loss of his friend Enkidu, or companion or partner perhaps. And some texts say that he was so devastated that he cried like a wife when a wife loses her husband. So there is kind of a correlation between being in a established relationship, surely homoromantic, potentially homoerotic, and perhaps even sexual. Although our evidence are currently quite minimal on the latter bit, we know that this component of having a homoromantic love is quite a frequent interpretation nowadays. And therefore, this could be classified as one of the earliest homoromantic texts or pieces of literature. It's also interesting that Gilgamesh after that was so devastated that he went on a very long trip to seek immortality, and he met this person Utnapishtim to find the secret of immortality. But that's a continuation of the story. What we know is that perhaps Gilgamesh, in a way, found immortality for himself and Enkidu, in the sense that for 4,000 years their strong relationship managed to pass through history as an example of very strong, passionate love, perhaps homoromantic or homoerotic love. So strong that perhaps we cannot trace a direct correlation, but we know that this idea of strong love, homoromantic or homoerotic love, can also be found in classic texts. And some people may feel that there may be some similarities with more classical stories, including the stories of Achilles and Patroclus, although, of course, we cannot trace any sort of direct correlation or direct link there. Is definitely something that a theme that we identify in ancient literature. So we are traveling slowly forward in time. We are now heading from 1300, 1200 BC. So that's 3,200 years ago, from the archives of Ashurbanipal to ancient Greece with the poet Sappho. We are using an object from, again, the collection of the National Museums, Wales. It's a badge that represents the poet Sappho herself. We are around, I would say, roughly 2,600 years ago, roughly 600 BCE, where Sappho was writing and composing poetry. A type of poetry that was meant to be let's say, performed along with music and accompanied by a lyre, for instance. We know that there's, I would say, different opinions about the life and the writings of Sappho. On one hand, Sappho is usually referred to one of the first lesbians. Sappho is often associated with the Isle of Lesbos, and it's often associated with lesbian love. And many scholars and archaeologists would agree with that. In fact, many people agree that it's a celebration of love and passion between women. others would say that our understanding of love and passion between people of the same gender or same sex, it is different from what was 2,600 years ago. Some scholars say we cannot directly correlate being a lesbian today with being with having sexual attraction or homoerotic attraction for someone of the same sex or same gender. Therefore, it's a bit still a matter of study, but what is sure is that the poetry is fantastic to describe relationships between women, including passionate and erotic attraction. So there's this passage here that I would like to share with you today, this piece of poetry from Sappho, and she goes, I've had not one word from her. So in modern times, one could translate this, I was ghosted, but I wouldn't do that. I wouldn't translate poetry into modern language or modern jargon. But anyway, going on. Frankly, I wish I were dead. When she left, she wept a great deal. She said to me, "This parting must be endured, Sappho. I go unwillingly." It's basically a description of every breakup ever. It's basically, we could summarize that with the modern interpretation of "it's not you, it's me, Sappho." Basically, unfortunately, this the partner leaves and the person is left alone with no word whatsoever from the other side. So yeah. This is just an example of the poetry of Sappho, and I highly recommend you to have a look at other pieces. Again, just to pause here to remember that you can donate as we go. You can chat with me. I'm just gonna check real quickly, just to check Instagram and Twitter if you got any question whatsoever going. You can also log into Twitch if you want to ask any question through Twitch. And feel free to interrupt or ask any question at any point in time. Yes, we are definitely live. There we go. I'm going to share this post. And there's people wishing happy birthday, but there is no question at this point in time. Very good. So we can keep going. There's also a QR code here that you can take a photo if you want to donate, or you can use the link in the chat as well. Okay, so we keep going forward in time. We are now heading to the Roman Empire with the Emperor Hadrian. Now, I believe that Emperor Hadrian is one of the well-known emperors of the Romano-British period in the UK. Mostly for the Hadrian Wars, because it's quite a significant landscape in the UK. But not many people know of the love life and passion and desire of the Emperor Hadrian. Now, I mentioned before that we should not perhaps fall into the trap of translating our modern experiences with the experiences and identities of people that lived 2,000 years ago. However, there can be some very strong similarities, and sometimes we can rely on the experiences of the people or how they describe themselves. So we are going to look into a particular relationship of the Emperor Hadrian. Although homosexuality or bisexuality in the Roman Empire, but also in classical Greece and Rome, was quite widely, I would say, maybe accepted or practiced, I would say. There were not the same connotation or implications that we found in more recent times. Many people had bisexual or homosexual relationship. What in Roman time was particularly significant was the role in a homosexual relationship. They were particularly judgy with what roles people were having in bed, basically, or what approach or what presence they had in life. Ancient Romans wanted men to be dominant and strong. Therefore, they were judgy towards submissive people, receptive, bottom, or passive man in a homosexual relationship. You would say that in the imaginary of the Roman man, perhaps everyone was a dominant top, while pretty much everyone that was a bottom was judged. And there is a bit of a funny story about Caesar being judged not for having homosexual relationship every now and then, but for bottoming for a king. Of course, there's not much evidence that I can bring to the table, but this type of story, it's often mentioned, whether it's true or not. Well, it's just indicative of the perception of the Romans towards homosexuality, not just in a negative way, but judging the performance, and they were more accepting of dominant role, and they were also hoping that people will eventually get married to a person of the opposite sex. Of course, that was from 2,000 years ago or more. But those were the expectations. So we should not equate or translate with modern time, but that's just for you to know. So Hadrian had a strong love, desire, and attraction to another man, Antinos, which, if I'm not mistaken, was from Greece, but with Turkish ancestries and backgrounds, and the love was incredibly strong and powerful, so powerful that it echoed through time till today. And we know of the good of the relationship, but we also know of the bad of the relationship, in particular the unfortunately unsuccessful story that culminated with the death of Antino, it says that Antino died in the River Nile in Egypt, kind of falling from a boat and dying in the river. This is one of the versions, of course, of what we know that happened between Antino and Hadrian. Hadrian was absolutely devastated, next level devastated, not devastated after a breakup. And perhaps the way that he dealt with death was unique. So unique, and he was so in love with Antinous that he founded a city dedicated to his lover, his boyfriend, and his partner Antinous, Antinopolis. So in love that he dedicated and created a whole religion, a cult around the god Antino. So in love with him that he built one of the last obelisks in Egypt that they were inscribed with Egyptian hieroglyphs. I think that after that time, Egyptian hieroglyphs were started to be less used, or at least evidence that we have are much more less numerous or less significant. So this beautiful obelisks was dedicated to Antinous, and I think is one of the last pieces of Egyptian hieroglyphs literature that we got in the shape of an obelisk, of one of the last of. In any case, at some point this obelisk was even moved to Rome, and is still visible in Rome as a monument to the love of homosexual relationship and love and desire and attraction between Hadrian and Antinous. Beautiful. There is a fantastic book that I enjoyed when I was much younger, Memoir of Hadrian, and by a Belgian-born French writer. I put it there if you want to have a look. I'm extremely envious and jealous of the relationship between Antinous and Hadrian. It's my birthday today. I've received beautiful gifts. I certainly have not received a whole religion, a city, or an obelisk dedicated to me, but I'm not even expecting that, although this set the bar quite high and the standards quite high in homosexual relationships. Just want to pause here to say thanks for the donations. Donations are coming in. We have already reached 66% of the total target. So happy that this is happening today. So please keep the donations going. Even just £1 or £2 would really make a difference, and every bit helps. The story of Antino and Hadrian is sometimes equated with the relationship between Alexander the Great and Hephaestion, although I don't think that we have the same amount of evidence for them, but perhaps there is scope for doing some research and finding a bit more about this. We are going again a bit forward in time now. We are going to medieval South Asia, medieval India. We are going to look a bit more into gender here. I'm using an object from the National Museum Wales. It's a statue of the god Ganesh or Ganesha, which was commissioned in Wales and by the Wales Puja Committee. And and the artists were invited to travel to Wales to produce this object. Ganesha is known as a god of knowledge, of wisdom, of wealth, and education, success. So is a god that people would love in their daily lives in India, because there's so much that a connection with Ganesha can give in terms of, well, not just in India, it can be in South Asia in general, it can be in Southeast Asia as well. But my experience with this god is mostly from India, because I lived there for many years. Therefore, I may just talk about them with their, let's say, the followers' experience in India in particular. So you often find some images of Ganesha in a car or in a house, just as a symbol of success and wealth and wisdom. What is interesting about Ganesh is it's a lot of things that are quite interesting about Ganesha, but for the purpose of this talk, an interesting aspect is that Ganesha was generated only by a goddess, Parvati or Parvati, and this kind of can allow us to talk about the fluidity, binary or non-binary gender of gods in India. We're going to medieval India now to look at the parents of Ganesha, Shiva and Parvati or Parvati. Shiva in particular is particularly interesting for understanding this idea of gender fluidity or gender changing gods. You have here one of the statues that you will see pretty much in every gallery that shows Indian or South Asian art and Southeast Asian art is Shiva Nataraj, is a dancing Shiva, or Shiva as Lord of Dance. What is interesting is that when in this posture, Shiva represents certain type of values, certain type of aspects of creation, and when he's in this creative form, creative energy as Lord Creator, is represented as having both aspects and features of feminine and masculine energy, of the features of a god and a goddess together. However, it is not clear whether it's fusing two aspects of being a god and a goddess at the same time, or whether it's none of them anymore. It transcends, it goes beyond the two, feminine and masculine, or whether it is something else entirely. What you know is that when it's in its creator, Lord Creator, creator of the universe, it's in this state of being both or none, basically. Another very similar configuration of Shiva is when Shiva is represented as Hardhanari or Hardhanarishvara, which is the god of having both these features, and in a way representing features of a god and a goddess, or perhaps transcending both the energies and features of god and goddess. But in this state, Shiva represents the most powerful aspects of God as a creator. So not just Shiva as a destructor, but it changes a bit his energy into, or his aspects of his domain into being a creator. It's interesting because there's many of these example of divine androgyny, binary or non-binary, that in South Asia, but also in Southeast Asia, where gods such as Lakshmi Narayan are also represented. There are Vishnu as Narayan and Lakshmi are combined together with similar features, or where Shiva as a masculine god and Vishnu as a masculine god, because of this fluid nature, can also let's say have a sort of relationship and even have sex and generate gods or generate life or even producing a son together. And this brings us to talk a bit more about gender in South Asia. There are gods that are particular gods of and worshipped, followed by gender non-conforming people in South Asia, or people that identify as transgender or third gender. And there is a nice film that was founded by the production houses in Wales, with directors that are based in Wales. One in particular is presented on the website of Chapter here in Cardiff, and I recommend that you have a look at that. Back in 2018, I remember I gave a talk 1 month after the Section 377 was challenged in South Asia, in India in particular, that kind of concerned the decriminalization of homosexual relationships. So while I was giving that talk 3 years ago, I was not just talking about the importance of the of that moment, the decriminalization of homosexuality of the 377, but also the importance for the transgender community or the third gender community in South Asia, because they lived in a sort of a gray area because of this. Because in South Asia, hijra or third gender individuals, or Tritiya Prakriti in Sanskrit, they're kind of accepted culturally. They're kind of part of the South Asian cultural landscape in general. They are more accepted than generally tend to be more accepted than homosexual individuals. However, before that was decriminalized, the problem was that they were in a gray area where perhaps they could not express their sexuality necessarily, but their identity was easier to be expressed, a bit easier perhaps. That also has all sort of overlaps with some work that I presented on HIV and sexual health in South Asia, where certain approaches to criminalization or decriminalization of homosexuality, but also the conversations with the transgender or the third gender community were particularly relevant to tackle and fight HIV and improve sexual health overall. On this note, I'm just gonna pause for 10 seconds to remind you all that you can still donate. Please, there's a link, there's a QR code. Please do, but also to mention that, there's plenty of work done on HIV and sexual health in Cardiff as well, and I would invite you to have a look at our. There is a it's called a Hindu temple, but I don't know if it's. Yeah, I think it can be classed as a Hindu temple in Grangetown, and there is we launched recently. It was launched a pilot that Fast Track Cardiff and Wales promoted through their channels, and this pilot is mostly servicing some easy, free and confidential tests for HIV in the area of Cardiff, of Grangetown and Butetown. This is a completely different theme, but since we're talking about HIV and sexual health, go and check the Fast Track Cardiff and Vale page, where you can find information on how to get a free and confidential test at home and do your tests and get your results. Super important. Anyway, back to our talk on LGBTQ histories. We are towards the end of this journey now, and we are going again forward in time. We are now at the end of the 18th century, early 19th century, right before the Victorian age, basically, at the very early stages, perhaps, when we have the this beautiful relationship between two women originally from Ireland, I would say Kilkenny County, and they moved to Wales, where they settled in North Wales first, and they became quite famous, iconic characters and figures of Wales before the Victorian age, but also perhaps during the Victorian age. They became quite iconic. Many people were just intrigued or curious to meet these two ladies that lived by themselves with their pets in North Wales, and they were just spending the days readings, writing, drinking tea. There are some objects in other museums that can help us reconstruct a bit the daily life, but what we know is that they loved each other very much, and they spent their lives together with books and writing and nature around them and their pets. And I think there's someone that say that their pets were often called or named Sappho. Whether or not it's a hint, I don't know, but perhaps it is. I want to say that it is. And there were quite strong rumors about their sexuality, and therefore they became quite famous as the, I would say, lesbians of Llangollen in North Wales. I need some water, pardon. Yes, so the ladies of Llangollen. And the people were buying postcards about them, but also trying to visit them. Newspapers and magazines were also writing about them. So they became quite celebrities between the end of 18th, early 19th century. And I would say that we can now move to the very last slides for today. Yes, so this is still a museum object. As I mentioned before, Mark from the St. Fagans Museums is collecting LGBTQ plus histories in the form of objects, digital or physical objects. And these are two of the objects from the collection from the Glitter Cymru group. As I mentioned before, is the group that is supporting BAME LGBTQ plus people in Wales, in particular, which means people of color, Black, Asian, minority ethnic groups in Wales, in particular people that fall under the LGBTQ plus umbrella. And this is a picture from Pride. I think it's beautiful. There's some smiley people there. I can see Rania, Namer, I can see Rahim over there, Vish, and other people that are part of the glitter community, and they organize public events very often, including the recent Glitter Pride, but also some videos that they produced for TED Talks or all sorts of incredible things. So really, this is the last slide just to celebrate the fantastic work that they're doing, and hopefully we will be able to complete our fundraisers soon and donate to Glitter Cymru. And so it can be also an opportunity to thank them for the work that they've done over the past 5 years and perhaps change the landscape of activism for BME LGBTQ plus people in Wales. Very well. I would say that this is all for the day. I hope that you enjoyed our 1 hour long journey across history and time and archaeology. So yes, please go on with questions if you have questions. As I say, I have